evening. Tonight, we are talking about diabetes. And I'm going to start out with a little story. Jimmy was a big baby. He was 10 pounds at birth. And by age 10, he tipped the scales at 150 pounds. He's baby fat, his mother said. He'll grow out of it. Jimmy did grow out of it and into something worse, diabetes. By age 13, he was 20 pounds heavier, tired all the time, constantly hungry, no energy, and he satisfied his hunger with pizza, burgers, donuts, French fries, soft drinks, and cookies and cake and brownies for dessert. He rarely ate salad, vegetables, beans, or fruit even. He seldom exercised, and he was thirsty no matter how much soda he drank. He suffered from depression and poor concentration. His pediatrician told him that at his current course, he would be dead by age 25. Sadly, Jimmy's story is not uncommon. In fact, 1 out of 3 children born in the United States in the year 2000 will develop diabetes by young adulthood. There are roughly 20 million adult diabetics and 40 million who are in the process of developing diabetes called prediabetes. A lot of them don't even know it. So that means 1 out of 4 adult Americans either have diabetes or are in the process of developing it. Unfortunately, diabetes doesn't hurt at first. If it did hurt, you might pay attention to it. But generally, it doesn't hurt at first. So what is diabetes? Diabetes mellitus is a group of diseases characterized by high blood sugar levels caused by no insulin production, or insufficient insulin production, or resistance to insulin's effect. Type 1 diabetes is autoimmune insulin dependent. It's autoimmune disease, meaning your body sort of has a little bit of mistaken identity where it could happen following a viral illness, where your body gets mixed up about what it's trying to attack to make you better, and it may focus on the cells in the pancreas that make insulin. It is absolute insulin deficiency. So you have to take shots, or have a pump, or have a transplant. And I think it was in 1923, if I recall right, when insulin was actually invented, the injectable insulin. So up to those years, as you can imagine, people didn't have very good lives. They essentially had to stay away from carbohydrates entirely, and their lives were usually difficult and not very long. So people that don't make insulin usually have to, I call it thinking like a pancreas, they have to give themselves 2, 3, 4, usually it's 3 or 4, sometimes 5 injections a day. So they need insulin in the background that takes care of the glucose that comes up and down in your bloodstream, and then faster acting insulin with meals to take care of any carbohydrates. So type 2 is non-insulin dependent, but as it advances and the oral medication or diet and exercise doesn't work anymore, then oftentimes people have to go on insulin in addition to, maybe only 1 shot a day, but they can actually also become insulin dependent. carbs make glucose. Your body uses that for energy. Your brain absolutely needs glucose for thinking. That's what it needs to think. And so you have to have this, but your body only uses it if you have insulin that will push it into the cells that need it. So with type 2 diabetes, it's usually a situation where the cells are resistant to the insulin trying to get that glucose for energy into the cell. Does that make sense? Are you looking so far? Okay, so 20 million diabetics, 40 million pre-diabetics, and 90 to 95% of adult diabetics are type 2. It's the more common one. And I hear people say, oh, you have the really bad one, or he has a really bad one, meaning type 1. Type 2 is just as bad as type 1. The only difference is most people with type 1 have to live with it longer because they usually are diagnosed in childhood. You may be wondering why I know so much about this, because I lived in Alaska 7 years, and I was employed by the hospital, and I was in charge of the diabetes program. The Native American Indian Health Service Diabetes Program, who has an excellent program all around the United States. So I was the nurse case manager and diabetes educator. So that's the reason I know a lot about it. Anyway, type 2 diabetes is a little different. Like I said, it's usually diagnosed when you're older, 40, 50, 60. And it's usually diagnosed in people that carry around extra weight, and especially they call it the apple shape, where the weight is carried around in the middle. They're more at risk. Get little exercise, have some pretty bad lifestyle habits or eating habits and that. It's actually considered a cardiovascular disease. And the reason it's considered a cardiovascular disease is because they are so high at risk for heart attack, stenting, open heart surgery, and strokes that they call it a cardiovascular disease. So that means not only do doctors have to focus on their blood sugars with the oral medication. Our oral medications, there's diet and exercise, all these things can really improve diabetes, but they have to also treat your blood pressure, and they also have to treat your cholesterol, because all those things are part of the cardiovascular aspect of this. Unless something is done to prevent it, diabetes will result in 35 million heart attacks, 13 million strokes, 6 million episodes of renal or kidney disease or failure, and blindness, 8 million instances of blindness or eye surgery, and 2 million amputations. Inactivity, and I gotta see where I am with these slides, sorry, I'm just kind of going off. Sedentary lifestyle, unhealthy diet, we talked about these 4 things already. And we also talked about the additional risk factors and that doctors have to address these things on the screen that I already mentioned. And I mentioned that as well. But it also leads to, it can lead to dementia. An incident of, which I have witnessed many times, an incident of low blood sugar in an elderly person takes away oftentimes their memory for a short time, and oftentimes all of that memory never really comes back. There's a deficit after they have a low blood sugar, which would mean that's an imbalance between the insulin and the blood, or the glucose that they take in, so they end up with a low blood sugar. 2 of the most powerful steps you can take towards preventing and treating diabetes our daily exercise, and a high fiber diet. As I mentioned, I was in Alaska for 7 years as the diabetes case manager and educator, and we treated the Native Americans that lived on the coastal areas. They are really, truly the Eskimo people. People think that all Native Americans that live in Alaska are Eskimo. They are not. The interior Native Americans have a different name, etc. But anyway, these are people that have lived a subsistence lifestyle, and a subsistence lifestyle is hunting and gathering. Historically, that's how they got their food. So they had the exercise of the hunting and gathering, and they lived on sea mammals, whale, seal, walrus, fish, salmon, and berries. There's vegetables in the sea. There's fruit, sea peaches, and it's the bulb of a seaweed, actually. So that's how they lived. But then, lo and behold, came along, not fast food, because they don't have fast food, but they have junk food. Came along chips, soda, high C, Kool-Aid, all those things that are not good for you. And they loved it. And so they are, in that region, being affected by the diabetes that, down in Arizona, most of the Native Americans that live in the Arizona tribes, they fully expect to get diabetes. They don't really even question it. They just know, because that 50% have it. And they pretty much expect to have amputations and blindness. So they kind of expect that. I don't know a lot about what all contributed to those Native Americans, but up there in Rome, in the villages, there were 15 villages that we also cared for. And they're native villages on the sea, very remote. And so little planes, these little, they were commercial planes, but they were small planes, because it didn't take a big plane to go into these little villages. But I've ridden on some of those planes, and I was there. There might have been another passenger, but the rest of it was full of soda. And I would hear the pilots say, in bad weather, I don't want to risk my life for a plane full of soda. So anyway, they're trying to prevent that from happening up there, like it has happened in the other areas. So I was in charge of also a pre-diabetes program as well, trying to educate and teach. But bottom line is, if those populations stick to their native traditional diet, they would never have to worry about diabetes. So you can see here where some of the things that we all love: saturated animals, fat, fried foods, sweet and refined grains, cookies, and all those things. And sugary drinks. Not only, I have to stress this too, that not only is soda a culprit, but excessive amounts of orange juice. I said before, people think that it's a great thing. It's not. It can be just as bad for you. A serving of orange juice is a 4-ounce glass. That's considered a serving. So you can go to different restaurants and get a 16-ounce glass of orange juice. You're not doing yourself any favors. Those sugars react in your blood just like a soda does. So, what should you do? There's lots of stuff out there. Beans, whole grains, nuts, seeds. High fiber vegetables. Colorful berries and greens. Fruits are good, but if you have diabetes, you have to watch it a little bit. Omega-3 Omega-3s are really good for cardiac problem prevention. And they used to get it from seal. Eating seal is how they got there. And they're good cholesterol in those regions because of the eating of the whale and the seal and those things is so high, doctors don't even believe what the value that they're eating, because most white, I don't want to offend anybody, most non-natives have struggled to see their good cholesterol over 50, whereas sometimes, I've seen it 125, and that's cardioprotective, that protects your heart. So, I'm kidding. Rick, my husband told me I would talk too much on this one. Monounsaturated nuts, avocado, olives, and olive oil. Good choices. So you gotta eat, but don't eat too much. Most people could live on considerably fewer calories and less food. Mostly plants is a good choice. High fiber, plant-based diet, exercise every day. The doctor I worked with used to tell the patients, there's nothing I can do for you or give you that is as good as exercise. Water instead of high-calorie drinks. Adequate sleep and stress management. Of course, if you have diabetes, always work with your healthcare provider and team, and they can help you. And connect with others, trust God, stay focused, keep at it, and don't give up. Something as simple as a walk can be the exercise, all the exercise you need. I can do everything God asks me to with the help of Christ, who gives me the strength and power.